Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Earth Day and welcome back to Sundance's National Poetry Month reading series. We're glad that you've joined us for the fourth time this month. If you have any questions during our reading today for our poets, go ahead and leave them in the comments and we'll get to them at the end if there's time. Today we'll be hearing from poets Kenniston, Kate Fennimore, and Courtney Clifton. Here to lead us into the readings is our host, Sean Griffin.
Thank you, Emily, and welcome all of you, those I can see on the screen and those out there in the ether world. Welcome to people from beyond our home here. Each Thursday afternoon this month, I've started by reading one of Laura Weatherington's poems, and before we begin the reading, that's what I'm going to do. She's a Reno sister who lives in the Netherlands at this time, and I want to read this poem from her new book. This old bird's got a lotto ticket, after Hannah Weiner. Some whippoorwill burns its own unknowable name. The clouds are cracked mad in the sky. Wait, what am I saying? Goodfellas is on. This is why I am crying. Of course I will die. In the movie's background, the music is loud. Joe Pesci subsumed by its current, while the warm wet of one man's highway escapes, and that life, no real one at all. The birds outside the window are laughing, checking their bone-white fire song. Even the willows throw shade. If this whippoorwill sings, blows her luck. That's Laura Weatherington's poem. So welcome again to everyone out there in the ether sphere. Thrilled tonight. We have three real strong women poets, and I think you're gonna love what you hear tonight. I want to thank Emily, all of our crew at Sundance, everybody that's working behind the scenes to put this on, and all the many people that are listening in for making this month possible. Our first reader tonight is Courtney Clifton. Courtney was raised in the Nevada desert, and she's working on her MFA at UNR, and she's had work come out in The Meadow, Helen Literary Magazine, Brushfire, and an anthology of emerging poets. Let's give a warm welcome to Courtney Clifton.
Thank you. I do want to just thank everybody who's tuning in for choosing to spend their Thursday with poetry tonight. I want to thank Sundance and Emily for hosting, and thank you, Sean, for inviting me to read tonight. I'm going to start with a couple of poems about relationships. They've been very important to me recently. Just during these isolating times, I've thought a lot about them over the year. So the first poem is dedicated to Christina. I'll ask again tomorrow. Prayers scattered wide. Is it too much to ask where I'll be when I die? You're sure I'm close to my last life. Can tell by the length of my eyelashes, or was it the time I tried to convince you that I was already dead? A water tower and a parking garage are the same now, a place to stand and listen for feather whispers. There is a night parked next to the truckee when we address the lessening of me and me, how the bones of a bird suggest absence like anything hollowed. I'm thinking this could save me. I mean, my face in your hair, your warm hands, no expectations for small talk. Is this prayer's purpose? The next poem is kind of a work in progress. I've been working on this catalog poem, and it's just about different types of love and intimacy. Somebody told me that it's kind of fun in a reading to hear a less developed poem, so I thought I'd share this one. It's called When We Talk About Love, after Raymond Carver. Andrew cries after the dentist and in my bed later because time. Natasha has eyelashes that are stuck to my thumbprints and a voice that tries to knock at my pupils. If Nathan ever wrote a suicide note, I could pinpoint every pause, both commas and second guesses. There was a time when Austin and I slept so close together I could feel him loving another man, and I still lent him my toothbrush in the morning. Joseph learned before anyone that I look best in green and feel happiest while growing tomatoes. Riley leaves his socks outside, but always checks the weather, brings the plants in before a storm, takes the trash out before the truck. Christina was born in a hotel, not the same one her mother dove from, but that's why she drives me through parking garages whenever I feel myself lessen. Hannah talks about rivers like they're friends, like they will current no matter how badly we want them still, and how riverbanks expose the roots. Ashley and I watched her dog give birth to a dead puppy. She took it out of the kennel, and we both know what it's like to kneel. When we talk like we know what we're talking about, when we talk about love, our human noises sound precise. I can almost imagine my blood runs clear. And then just to continue on with this theme, the next poem I'm going to read is just about a complex relationship, titled When She Stood Dripping Wet. We were dropping acid in Natasha's makeshift backyard pool. The birds on the wire looked like chopsticks on the piano, 2 fingers thumping in unison. There's a period of time before our eyes adjust to the darkness, and there is a moment before she kisses me where she looks absolutely ridiculous. She started doing harder drugs that summer, started asking us all for grocery money, which almost checked out, what with the collarbones and a hollowed rib cage and all. Last time I saw her, I felt like somebody somewhere had drained her eyes of pigment, needled her cheeks dry. I loved her. When she still had smooth hair the color of sunlight on rivers, when she stood dripping wet while I dried her thighs. She looked up at the birds on the wire, just whispered, music. And her knees, I spent so much extra time drying her knees. Later, under the table, I touched mine to hers, both sunburnt and warm, birds and bones making music. The next one I'm going to read is, it's just really a contemplation on meaning making and different perspectives. It's called There's a Lot That Isn't Making Sense These Days. There's a lot that isn't making sense these days, so I save eraser shavings just in case. I stay awake until morning so I can water my plants with the sunrise, but then I sleep all day and the sun takes credit for tomato blossoms. I'm in a competition with the night sky to see who can catch more sadness, but there are so many different kinds and we disagree about the rules. Like how sometimes the moon and the sun are in the same sky, or sometimes the flower is poisonous to cats. And when I lie down in the shower, I'm either closer to my skin or the ground. And what happens when something is sad for one person, but best in the end? Like how sometimes a dead bird in the driveway means love. Excuse me. Shortly after I wrote the poem that's questioning everything, I wrote this poem just about listening to the world. It's sort of my answer to like, what is anything and where can we find those answers? So I found this title yesterday. Cars parked and running, keys turned to start again. The cough or sob of the car trying to become more of the thing it already is. There's an engine or a wing inside pretty much anything. A godmother once spoke of her obsession with shoulder blades. The same bottle cap on a nightstand for years, a crow's offering through window unlatched. Cats puddled in alleyways, curl together like eyelashes stuck to cheeks. Sisters make a wish like weather. A page torn from a dictionary. Metamorphosis, meteorologist, mistake, mistranslate, palms read for free. Everything tells you what you need to hear. I actually have another poem to read that is also a work in progress. To me, this poem is about gender and the desire for fluidity. Lately, I've just been really recognizing the value in like reciprocation and that give and take relationship and how fluid that is. And so this poem is kind of just about all of those things for me. So I called it Becoming River. There's a metaphor in there somewhere. even the softest fruit, something, something, something. I used to think all birds were girls except for eagles. Eagles were men, men and sacred. Sacred is just scared with one tiny difference, and that's why we pray to a god. I am down on my knees again, this time to become river, to cup my hands, bring the water to my lips, send a kiss downstream and know it will return. Blackberry bushes have thorns too. In fact, it's not always about roses, though roses seem often to think so. I definitely think that life is super weird and I have a lot of questions, but sometimes I think that I have answers too. So this is on to something, or so it seems. I was looking for $2 when I found a bird feather in my back seat. What is the moon? Sometimes I sit backward on the toilet and pretend I am a lady of business. Member does not come before remembering, I don't think, unless attaching a penis. Is the moon a bone? A lot of sayings are only half sayings, and the back ends make more sense, like how the late mouse gets the cheese, or the parts about the enemy and the womb, family and water, war and blood. Is the moon, too, a woman? I haven't seen a movie in theaters that wasn't also a movie in theaters when my dad was a kid. Just better effects, he says. I've never touched the portrait of Dora Maar. I bet I never will. But I have held a cadaver kidney and ended up falling in love with the boy who showed me where the liver was. I find little to be more romantic than a jar full of quarters, or if I'm being honest, a naked woman in my kitchen asking for a towel. I won't change my mind about rivers, and I think the moon is too quiet. All right, I'm just going to read 2 more poems this evening. The first one is just a recollection of my experiences growing up in a rural community. I do this thing where I have this poem about Weatherington, Nevada, and every year or so I just revise it a little bit to reflect different things that I'm thinking about or going through. For me, it's kind of a way to stay connected, or I guess return home even if I don't want to or can't go there physically. So this version is titled 15 in Weatherington, Nevada. The smell of wet dirt and onions from the Perry farm constricts the entire town with undistributed wealth, masks the crystal chemical mixture stink from tiny apartments chalked throughout the streets. Children ride bikes down Main Street to bury jars of coins saved for hot summer days in Chevron slushies. Every Friday, the back row of the movie theater takes the virginity of another adolescent, and another name is sharpied on the second stall door of the women's bathroom. I learned to hate my mother, start 7 a.m. arguments on principle, learn to scrub my eyeliner clean in the high school bathroom before coming home. I learned chugging perfume doesn't hide the scent of alcohol on breath, and that a boy will light my cigarette first if he thinks I'm pretty. I wear the bathing suit that's one skipped rock ripple away from exposed nipple, because when churchmen say my body is a temple, I promise mine is more like the abandoned slaughterhouse by the river, spray painted in swear words and littered with empty beer cans. After dark, we drive out toward the dairy farms, kiss each other through the smoke of miniature cigars, and when boys kill rabbits in the alfalfa fields, I'm not surprised to feel nothing. All right. The last poem I'm going to read this evening is something that I think many people have probably experienced. And also, I just think it's fun to think back on a time when I wasn't afraid to go out in public and die from a deadly virus. So this poem is called Downtown Reno After Getting Dumped by a Boy I Wasn't Even Dating. The boy from the bar has 5 names that are all spelled real weird. The boy, more alcohol than boy, learns I like poetry, claims to be a poet, writes me a poem, recites it's lit about 9 times in one stanza. He's sure we have a connection, can tell by the fact that I'm not wearing a shit ton of makeup, which isn't a compliment, and I actually am wearing a shit ton of makeup. He's got me nice and cornered between fire pit and gasoline breath, learns I've got an English degree, confuses it with a philosophy degree, quizzes me on Thoreau, but doesn't notice when I replace famous quotes with Lana Del Rey lyrics. The boy tells me I might be almost as smart as him. The boy tells me to sit pretty and wait for him by the door. The boy tells me not to order a drink, that he might need a ride home. And I, forgetting what it's like to taste blood for the first time, listen. Thank you.
Very nice, Courtney. Well, I'm glad you told him to put his cookies where the sun don't shine. Nice work there in that last poem. Great stuff. I appreciate all the different venues and places you visited, particularly the return to Weatherington. Our next reader tonight is Kate Fennimore. Kate's currently working on her MFA at the University of Nevada, Reno as well, and her poems have appeared in Noya Review, Beyond Words Literary Magazine, and elsewhere. She grew up in Oregon, and she often writes about place. Let's give a warm welcome to Kate.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here tonight and to get to read with Courtney and Anne and celebrate Poetry Month. So just feeling very lucky and very happy right now to have this kind of sense of community tonight. The first poem I'm going to start with is called The Moment After. I'm always questioning if it was the right thing to do, trying to hold the not knowing in my hand, because my anxiety takes root in the back of my mouth, my molars oiling the rest of my bones with worry. Is every change a decision? I've always assumed that a moment was whole, but it's sharp and edged, bound to the laws of gravity once it ends, so unlike the blue jays outside, flinging themselves from the pines, turning liquid, as if losing vertebrae when they meet the air. If the birds are supposed to make me think of trust, why am I only thinking about the moment after that feeling ends? I hesitate to say what happiness is. The birds must trust that their wings will hold them, that they won't fall to the ground in the wake of their decision to leave the trees. But I feel angled, wondering if every next change will be my undoing. This next poem is an ekphrastic poem after Lois Dodd. The painting that it's after is, if I'm remembering right, it's called Cows and Clouds. I'm looking for the light. There's so much in the in-between of light and dark, but the blind grass can't see how the light tongues the cows in the field. It's just feeling for the change in warmth. The highlight on a backbone is like a scream of sunlight. The cows' languid heads drag shadows across the ground like separate figures, bearing the fuzzy weight of dimness. Look for how the light hits, rips through whatever it touches. The acorns have started to breathe because shadows breathe. The clouds too are just like the cows, ribbed with black and white. This next poem is kind of a roundabout response to the moment we're all going through. I think I find a lot of comfort in memory, as do many people, and so this is kind of a poem that approaches that. The whole world is strobing, like the 10-inch antennaed television we had for so many years growing up. Mom worked 2 jobs then, 3 if you count lifting us all up. We would sit around the red rug with wood chips from the fireplace embedded in its long hairs. We were like an upcrop of weeds, dandelions growing in the yard out back, heads on top of hands, on top of elbows, blooming as our fingers threaded the carpet. We must have been watching American Idol on a Thursday, drift in and out of the static. It painted each of our faces blue. This is the memory we want, the one in which everything seems like it is going to be okay. Things look so easy there. Still, sometimes you get to start new, because there isn't anything that isn't music on repeat. The late birds chirping outside, wind caught in the eaves, the ease of day slipping into night. I've been thinking a lot this semester about kind of capturing the incapturable, which, is a lot of what poetry does, but kind of like, how do you capture something in a moment of change? So this poem is kind of hearkening towards that idea. It's called How the Rain Stops. How the rain stops. Here it almost being, but the almost turns into afternoon, when the sky composes itself and the clouds hang back, wait to be made again, dressed by the sky like retucking sheets. The unmade echoes after the rain is gone. It still drips from branches, the flip of the switch at the torn blossoms pressured open, because they look like ands in between made and unmade. To be after is to bear what is normally hidden. The rain stops, the blossoms tuck their tendrils back in, the nectar wanting to be bodied again. No more overflow, no more effort, be still. Okay, this next poem is called December. I think I was just thinking a lot about kind of sounds with this poem. So December. I am a list of endings. Now I am ending because I feel like a sound, or the moment after one is spoken. Unfamiliar with myself, moment I am unfamiliar with the sky and its blue insistence. And now this month holds water. Up to my own neck, knee deep in mud, I hold water. I want what I don't have now. What I don't have now is how there is always a parting. The sky with its blue insistence is trying to represent renewal, but I am the animal who can't escape their past. Teeth sunk deep, no animal can escape. Again, the body sunk deep in the snow, the sunlight on the snow like sunlight pressed up against the frosted window. Light ends. Imagine how light ends, what it looks like at the end. A flash of wounded sky, the wound of darkness. Imagine welcoming the darkness. I've just got 2 poems left for you guys. So this next one is called If We Flatten Out Time. If we flatten out time, we get readable spaces during the cooling of day into night, a sigh as we enter the long strings of darkness. The black-tailed doe sweeps out of the trees towards the stems of lettuce in the garden, head bent. But let me keep going. If I'm lucky and run to the window in the bathroom during the early morning, she might still be there. Sleep clinging to me like aphids, night clinging to her like she is the last thing to hold on to. It's a brittle moment, where my eyes brush her black lips, the twitch of a tail. We are both waiting for the other to move, but I don't. I stand there, my toes cold on the linoleum. It's the fragility. I dare to turn on the porch light, to see more clearly what I can only ever glimpse. Once I see her there in the honey light, I see her 100 times over. Time is leveling us out, reducing us into pangs that snuff out altogether in the unknown drop of the present. Maybe the best we can do is make meaning in the dawn. Okay, so one more poem. This one's called Ode, and it's really just about how things end and we can't stop it, and kind of dealing with that feeling. Ode. The wind plays the power lines like an objection, meaning my home on grade road won't always exist. So our names carved in the tree by the pasture, you plus me equals forever, fades like the paint on the Ford, parked behind the red barn, because one day that tree will fall to its knees, and I will too. There's a quilt in the hall closet with all of its edges frayed, or there is always an end. Every winter, Dad covers the pipes so they won't freeze, for our lives are retying the stitches. So the gas in the can by the garage gives way to vapor. It cannot stop itself. I learn from the sag in the barbed wire fence because it's splitting open slowly with time. Decline is the most permanent. The grass is growing tall and the lawnmower still needs that spark plug from Ace, but we haven't got around to it. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, Kate. We appreciate that. I appreciate both of your meditations on trying to live with COVID. I think there's going to be a lot that will come out of this time. We just don't understand it yet. So thank you so much, both of you. Great stuff. Our next reader and final reader tonight is Kenniston, good friend of many of you out there in the ether bill. She's going to be reading from her new collection, Somatic, out from Terrapin in 2020. She's the co-editor of the New American Poetry of Engagement, a 21st century anthology. And her poems have appeared in Yale Review, Gettysburg Review, Literary Imagination, and elsewhere. She teaches at UNR, and let's give a warm welcome to Anne.
Hi, thank you so much. Thanks to Sean for inviting me and us. Thanks to Emily and Sundance for providing a home for readers and writers in Reno. Thanks to all of you for attending. And I just have to start by saying that it's just such a thrill for me to hear Courtney and Kate reading poems that they worked on in the workshop that we're in this semester, and to see what's happening with them and just to hear their work. It's been a real joy working with them and their classmates this semester. So it's been really an honor. Their work is so fine. So I'm going to read some poems from my book, Somatic. Here it is. And then if there's time, a few new books. So just a couple of things about the book. As the title suggests, it's about the bodily, especially bodily symptoms. So that's what the somatic means. Psychosomatic is when the psyche manifests through bodily symptoms. So that's something that the book also explores, partly through the notion and illness and sort of imagination of hysteria. So the book also explores the different poetic forms, the elegy, which is a poem of mourning, the ode, which is a poem of praise. And then I've made up my own form called the aria, which I think of as kind of a hysterical form, a kind of excessive emotional form. So I'm going to start with an early poem in the volume called Unconscious Ode. And several of the poems in this book are elegies or considerations of my relationship with my mother. So this poem refers to Lourdes, the town in France that has where a miracle apparently occurred to a young girl named Bernadette right around the turn of the 20th century, which I visited when I was teaching in France. And I'm quite interested in the way that hysteria and sainthood are kind of entangled. Some say that many so-called saints, female saints, were actually hysterical or epileptic or something like that. Unconscious ode. In each of us, my mother thought, there exists a hidden essence, mostly evident as pain or desire or the compulsion to repeat, not immortal soul, but the unconscious. Now that, as others say, she's passed, I like to visit churches that display the uncorrupted remains of saints and their sculpted bodies, the garment hems smooth from being touched. No one but Bernadette could see the beautiful, smiling child in white who called herself immaculate, but thousands came to Lourdes to watch her witnessing that miracle. The blind, lame, and dying still arrive in buses. Past the kitschy shops, the spring Bernadette scrabbled in the dirt to find, and the porch cluttered with abandoned canes and wheelchairs. They press their hair and faces against the muddy wall, the enormous church behind them affirming an uncontaminated world in the midst of escalating pain, and also the body in pain. I don't believe my mother is immortal or scattered over the earth or even alive in me, but in dreams which let the unconscious speak in puns and symbols, she sometimes returns, often thin and naked, but occasionally healthy, wearing her elegant work clothes. Sometimes she sits with me beside a hanging garden whose flowers, because they are so heavy, bloom abundantly, their weight enabling the blooming, then greater heaviness and more blooming. Let's see. Okay, so the next poem I'm going to read is a poem that is an Arya poem. So I'm sort of trying to channel this famous hysteric named Anna O, but I'm also sort of using Anna as kind of a conduit for parts of my own voice, of course. One of the symptoms that Anna had was aphasia. So she had difficulty speaking grammatically. So that was something I was allowing myself to play with in these poems. It's probably worth saying that that some subsequent scholars have felt that she had this kind of very intense relationship with her doctor, in which her doctor basically needed her to be sick in all sorts of interesting and exotic ways. And because she was very attached to her doctor, she obliged. And then the final detail is that the real person who was called Anna O in the case history, was a real person named Bertha Pappenheim, who lived in Vienna. And she was an accomplished lace maker. And I actually went to Vienna and went to the museum and I found some of her lace. Diagnostic aria. Please preserve my other names between some sheets as yet unwritten on, and diagnose my sick with just one word. Yes, you, my erstwhile doctor. Let the record show I failed to interpose, nor told, and failed to hear another word, but fell, nor ever called for help. Such a little heap of suffering I bequeath to science, what you find, while an unforeseen clump of later girls weeps in some later basement room, beset by the same condition, addiction, tuberculosis, or simulation. Here's where I was marred and marked and sat up all night, my disregarded book askew, my hysterical hands unable to tat the squares of lace I afterward was known for. And I should have added that list of tuberculosis, addiction, et cetera, those are some of the diagnoses that later doctors have given to Anna, saying like, oh, she wasn't really hysterical, she was just an addict. This next poem is called Residue Ode. And it was inspired by a trip I took to Turkey a while ago. And I saw lots of archaeological ruins, and that's where I learned the term spolia, which is when a building gets kind of broken into pieces and the pieces get reused. So all over Turkey, there are like these Roman ruins that are actually like being built, that are built into houses that are being used nowadays. Residue Ode. Because it was too late to impose a moral or chronicle the shard's provenance or rescue some discarded thing from dust, I began with what was left, the way great rectangular Roman blocks were hauled off as spolia and adapted to mundane purposes, a door jamb or part of an arch or wall. To receive grace doesn't mean believing you've been touched by God. It's opening your arms to doubt, the repeated non-appearance of the longed for proof until the faithful gather on the porch to watch the lit up hills like a palette someone ought to lift and paint with. Sometimes in stories, all the pieces come to life, the way the mute stones near Orpheus' severed head wept to hear its song, or the parts of Osiris' body strewn all over the world, clamored to be made whole, so again, they could be scattered. And then the last poem I'm going to read from the book is called Ultimatum Ode. And this poem actually comes from some of the more negative moments of my experience as a parent. And especially when you're having a conflict with the child and you make an ultimatum and you have this big cataclysmic conflict, and then you need to recover from it. So it's sort of about the aftermath of that. It's also influenced by a class I was taking at the Nevada Museum in pottery. So there was a lot of like pottery imagery in my poems for a while. Ultimatum Ode. Afterward, the heart disobeys because something has to break and then be reattached. Fingers pushing back what tore because we were once one clay. Why not unmake the law that everything has to fall down or decay, unmess the messy room using time lapse or play the film backward so the flattened man emerges from under the steamroller and walks away unharmed. By now, the barrier between us is so thick, it's beautiful, a lopsided, slippery, top-heavy, handmade construction, threatening to collapse, then collapsing, so we get another chance to try to repair it. And this is actually quite interesting for me because there are like all these echoes between the poems I read that I never noticed before. Lots of collapsing and yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna just read a few newer poems. And I think I'll read two. Okay, so here's a poem that's also an ekphrastic poem. And it's actually a poem that I thought a friend of mine was compiling a collection of poems about the works of Bruegel. So I dutifully went off and found a painting and wrote a poem about it. And then I was unhappy with that poem. So I kind of rewrote it from scratch. So it's not as directly about the painting, but the painting, if you're not familiar with it, is of this, tower being constructed in this like totally slipshod way. So the foundation isn't built, but they're building the top and it's falling down, but it's, so they're people working on all different stages of it. And then over on the side, there's the architect looking at the drawings of it saying, great job, everybody. So that is the painting. And as with many of Bruegel's paintings, it has incredible details, which I talk about in the poem. And the Bible story we remember is about this overreaching. So people were trying to build a tower so they could get to heaven and talk to God. God was mad. He shattered the tower. And that's why we all speak different languages. This poem has a run-in title. That violence gets concealed has been described, though it keeps unfolding, not just in corners in that quaint rendition, but right in front of us. No matter that I prefer details, some represented figure so tiny I need a magnifying glass, the online reproductions blurred when I zoom in. All that effort to deny the facts, the pretentious man in furs, studying drawings, duped as I was watching him at first. Of course, it's stupid to build a tower on an unfinished, unfinishable foundation. It twists and teeters and will soon collapse. Hubristic, doomed, and didn't God already say he'd strike it down? The aim was to help ordinary people scramble to heaven faster and touch God or whisper their secrets and transgressions, though what's depicted is an allegory of the treachery of dumping too much on an unstable base into a fragile scene of mortal toil, its frame imposed almost at random, death seeping in despite all the good cheer or else because of it. Only the survivors get to see the aftermath, the painting's viewers, I guess I mean. The artist's complicit too, his signature painted as if carved into the cornerstone of the maladroit construction he designed, though in my favorite detail, two tiny workers carry a heavy beam neither could lift alone. The forward-facing one, I like to think, warning his companion of what's ahead since he can't see. And then I want to end with a very recent poem. So Courtney and I and some other members of the workshop did this weekend intensive writing thing where we had to write a poem every day for 3 days. And this is one of the poems I wrote. So I should add that I co-edited with some other UNR grad students a edited collection called Ethics After Post-Structuralism. So I've been thinking a lot about ethics and what it is and what problems are related to it. And I also was thinking in this poem or wanting to juxtapose a bunch of different stuff. So you'll hear stuff about the 10 Commandments. I learned this little factoid about glitter on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. And then my thoughts about the Derek Chauvin trial while it was still happening. Proof and ethics. Often I wonder where ethics went. Not law or politics or the inscribed tablets hauled down from the mountaintop, foundational myth built on prohibition. 2 enormous tablets of reddish pottery, breakable, I thought, though that's not right. They were pure sapphire, it said, though there's no proof. These days, what once seemed solid is known to have diffused, bits of plastic in all our cells, inhalable, inhaled, chemicals diffusing from our mattresses, even glitter stuck in our lungs. So much invisibility lodged in me, and ethics anyhow, always having been a tool used by the powerful, a euphemism like the submachine gun assault rifle hybrid of Peacekeeper, famous thanks to an online game. A subterfuge or trick, a way to help us sleep, though recently I can't. In Minneapolis this week, one juror kept dozing off, or maybe several, in the middle of expert testimony for the prosecution that seemed to prove indisputably how George Floyd was killed, though it's a fact that so-called facts are subject to debate, which is the point of trial by jury, just a seed of doubt needing to be introduced, small contaminant against which the mind chafes, irritant turned into a poison no matter what occurred, which must be why I wait with upraised eyebrows like a startled doll for someone to burst on stage, as if ethics permitted an angel to swoop down, angel of history, angel of retribution, an anti-proof, figment or fantasy before which we bow down, its sheer, almost ridiculous spectacle manifest in a flurry of feathers and flame, mute, school marmish, and appalled. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne. It was lovely. Great stuff. Love hearing the new work too. Yeah, I probably should have started out the reading by saying yay for justice. What a week, huh? What a week. I'm sure the entire globe exhaled deeply after the end of that trial. And I'm sure it was every bit as much a surprise to everyone as it was to me. Well, Emily, do we have any comments or quotes in the chat that people have for our readers?
We don't. However, I have a quick question for Anne. I want to know what the fact about glitter was and how much is embedded in my lungs.
So I'm taking a little bit of license, but apparently glitter is a big pollutant in the ocean. So they're thinking about banning glitter. So I have to say that I took a little bit of license and just decided that it was probably in our lungs too, since everything else is. But the factoid or fact was really that it's, yeah, because it's so light, it blows away and comes off all the little pretty pictures we stick it on. And it's affecting marine life.
Wow. There's an Earth Day fact for you.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Well, again, I want to thank all of our readers. What a great night. What a wonderful night of women's voices. You each brought something really strong to the evening. So I'm so grateful for you coming. And thank you to Emily. So I'm going to turn it over to you here.
Yeah. Thank you, Sean, and thank you to everyone for watching. Thank you, Anne, Kate, and Courtney for being here. And we'll see you all next week for the final night of our annual Poetry Month reading series. Thank you, everyone. Bye.